My daughter's name's Morgan Elizabeth Cooke, and on November the 28th, 2007, Morgan was involved in a horrific car crash. The young man she was riding with was convicted of DUI. He was impaired with alcohol and drugs in his system. Morgan lived in the hospital for 5 days after this crash with critical injuries. She died on December the 3rd, 2007. And this Christmas season coming up will be my 5th Christmas without Morgan.
It was November the 28th in 2007, about 11 p.m., not terribly late. My wife and I were watching TV. The phone rang, I picked it up. It was the social services director of Fairfax Inova Hospital saying, asked me, "Are you Fred Cooke? Do you have a daughter, Morgan Cooke?" And I said, "Yes." After she had identified herself, I knew something was wrong. She said, "Your daughter has been involved in a very serious automobile accident. You and your wife need to come to the hospital immediately." And I said, "Is my daughter alive?" And she said, "We'll talk when you get here." So I didn't know, but I knew that it was a very serious situation. When we got to the hospital, the social services director met us and took us into a small room. I didn't feel as though it was real. It was almost a surreal experience, and she said, "Your daughter is in a coma, and the police officer will be in to talk to you as soon as I leave. She is in surgery now because her injuries are so extensive, and she has a dissected aorta, and they're trying to just keep her alive." And I asked if I could see my daughter, and she said no. When she gets out of surgery, you'll be able to see her. And then the police officer came in and told me that that the driver had been administered a breathalyzer and was drinking. They suspected that he had been smoking pot as well, but that they were filing preliminary charges against him for at least maiming because of the injuries to my daughter. And then my daughter got out of surgery. We sat, my wife and I, just hugging and crying and wondering what was going to happen. And they told us that our daughter had made it alive out of surgery, but was still in a coma. And I went in, and when I saw her and just saw how broken up and that a machine was breathing for her, I fainted. I just had never seen my daughter suffering like that. And that was November the 28th, and for 5 days, my wife and I would spend as much time there as we possibly could. We'd try to go home and be alone for 2 or 3 hours a night. And my sons and other relatives, we made sure someone was with Morgan around the clock. I said, and my wife said, if Morgan's going to die, she's not going to die alone. And on Monday, December the 3rd, Kay and I arrived at the hospital about 6 a.m. as we did every morning, and were met by the doctors who said that overnight Morgan's kidneys had failed and that her injuries were so extensive that she would not live through that day. And so we left from talking to the doctors and went in and sat down with our sons and said, we said, "Sissy's going to die today." And my wife and I pretty much, and our sons, just sat with her throughout the day and held her hand and whispered to her, hoping that she could hear us. just told her how much we loved her, and that we would miss her, and just to save a spot for us. And it was a long day, the longest day of my life. And at about 8 o'clock that night, the nurses came in and said all the signs indicate that she's going to die within the hour. And they said, we're going to remove the tubes because she can't survive any longer. So they removed the intubation tube and turned the machines off, and about 10 minutes later Morgan died. And she died with both of her brothers and their wives, and my wife and I holding her and saying the Lord's Prayer. And she left us at about 8:30 on Monday night, December 3rd.
Being in shock trauma ICU for 5 days, and watching her and seeing her so broken, and knowing that she may not survive, and then on the 5th day the doctor's telling us that Morgan could not survive. Her kidneys had failed, her brain was swelling, and they sent a counselor in to ask us if we would donate Morgan's organs. Morgan was an organ donor. She had already decided that when she turned 16 and got her driver's license. She checked that box, so we made that decision to donate Morgan's organs. But I cannot imagine. Well, I've been through it, and I understand what parents go through when they have to make those kinds of decisions.
It was almost bizarre. Our family's always been very close, and you don't love any one of your children any more than the others. They're all different. I guess it took maybe a week or so after the funeral, my oldest son, Kevin, who is now 35, at the time of Morgan's death, he was 31. We were standing out on our back deck, and Kevin looked at me and he said, "Dad, Sean and I kind of feel like we've lost you and Mom. That when Morgan died, you died with her." And I said, "Well, I got to be honest with you. When Morgan died, a big piece of her daddy did die." But I said, "I can't even imagine what it's like for you and Sean, my two sons, to go on with a long life, knowing that you don't have your sister to celebrate Thanksgivings and Christmases, and you don't have any nieces or nephews. You don't get to see your sister walk down the aisle." And I said, "To some extent, Kevin, you did lose a big part of your father." I said, "But I love you and Sean with all my heart." And I said, "Unfortunately, since your sister has died at the hands of a drunk driver, I may be a little bit more miserable to live with the rest of your life about drinking and driving, whether it's you or your friends." I said, "Because I have an absolute zero tolerance for drinking and driving." And I said, "I don't want you to feel like I'm going to be overly protective, but I'm going to be more protective." And I said, I can't imagine, I couldn't bear to lose either one of you. I said, "This is just the most torturesome, brutal, lifelong loss that anyone can ever imagine." And true enough, both of my sons tell me they wake up every day missing their sister.
If you've ever seen a horrific crash involving high-speed alcohol or drugs, it is just horrific. It's violent. It is violent to see. To have seen the car that my daughter was riding in the night of their crash, I can't imagine anyone survived. And yet 2 people in that car did survive. 2 people lost their lives.
The driver of the automobile, who was drunk, and high on marijuana. Was sentenced to 10 years, 7 years suspended, served 2.5 years, was given 6 months off for good behavior. Little did I know that my sentence was I was sentenced to a life of sadness and grieving.
Morgan's accident was so horrific. Not only did Morgan pass away, but the young man that was riding behind Morgan in the car was in a coma for 3 years. His family suffered watching him slowly die every day, went through numerous operations before he finally passed away in September of 2010.
To try to live life after losing a child is the most difficult task I could have ever imagined. I still today can't imagine the duration of the challenge. If people who were thinking about driving after drinking or doing drugs could see and feel the pain that a parent or a loved one has to see and feel every day after losing a child, a parent, a brother, a sister, if they could just feel it for 1 minute, what we feel every minute of every day, I guarantee it they wouldn't drink and drive. I guarantee it. It's a feeling that's pervasive. It never lets up. It controls your emotions. It controls your physicality. I'm nauseous a lot. I shake, I tremble. When I think about that call, when I think about watching my daughter die for 5 days, it's just physically wrenching. It's gut-wrenching. And it's emotionally, it's like someone is just stabbing you in the heart. And as I said to many, many people, many, many times, my heart is broken and it's broken forever.